Hey guys, just getting things set up here. I want to make sure that we're recording, and we are. It's the first one I've done this semester, so it's going to take me a second to get used to, but here we go. Wellness, first online lecture for you guys. We're going to be covering the spiritual dimension today, and we will finish it on Tuesday in the Warming House. So first things first, this is obviously a YouTube clip, so that's where I'll be posting things from now on my YouTube channel. So not that I'm an influencer whatsoever, but that's where I'm at. This is where I'll do most of my lectures from my office. By the way, 3rd floor Perry Center, if you guys ever need to chat with me or anything like that. So we're going to dive right into it. I'm going to try to keep these things as short as possible, so I'm going to click through them. Feel free to pause, rewind, screenshot anything that you want from your from whatever you're watching on. So spiritual wellness, components of Christianity, the core of what the values are, the things that we talked about on Tuesday. Since we go to a Christian school, we focus a lot on the spiritual aspects of things and how we tie them into all aspects of our life, and especially the dimensions of wellness that we talked about. I will dive more into this slide on Tuesday about the physical activity logs and when they're doing everything. But I want to just kind of start to let you guys know how they work. You guys will fill these out every 2 weeks. I think that I have the first one due February 9th, so not for a couple weeks. But we'll definitely talk about it more. You guys will fill these out. I think I mentioned on Tuesday, 60 minutes. It is 60 minutes, but it's 60 minutes per week, and you're going to be doing it over the course of 2 weeks. So it's going to be a total of 120 minutes. So again, I'll talk more about this, so just know that this is coming, so be prepared for that. Diving in spirituality. And when I was younger, and even not so long ago, defining what was spirituality was tough for me, because I thought like spirituality is Christianity, and it's not. Spirituality is often a trendy topic with our society, especially now with everything we have going on. But not all spiritual views are biblical. And the idea of that saying that just because someone's spiritual doesn't necessarily make them a Christian, and vice versa. Just because you're a Christian doesn't make you spiritual. So you can have spirituality for meditation or other religions, maybe not Christianity, or even like under the realm of Christianity. So it's not just spirituality does not equal Christianity. So I just want to get that thing clear. Every person is some way spiritually inclined. It's how God made us. I mean, we are driven to like believe in things, and it can be something as superficial as sports teams. I mean, I'm a huge Chiefs fan. You guys will know about that, and RIP my boy Patrick Mahomes, but hopefully he's good by Friday or Sunday. I mean, but we all believe in things. We all spiritually inclined to grab a hold of things, and that's the idea of spirituality. Next thing. But Christianity is we talk about a more biblical aspect when it talks about worldviews. And the core beliefs are such as that God created everything that exists, and God was not created, rather He's always existed. And when I was younger, this blew my mind. Kind of still blows my mind. My parents would say, and my Sunday school teachers would say, well, yeah, God's always existed. Yeah, but when was He born? No, He's always existed. He created the universe. Yeah, but when was He born? And that was hard for me to wrap my head around. It's still hard for me to wrap my head around today. But He wasn't. He always existed, and that kind of stems from He's always existed to heaven and being in heaven for eternity. Like those two kind of concepts just blow my mind, and it's so fascinating. In this topic right here, it's something that's really interesting. All of God's creation has a purpose, and that to me is so touching, because everything that is existed or has existed has a purpose for this world. It has a purpose for you. Everything leading up to why you chose to come to Olivet, or why you decided to play that sport, or why you joined that club, or that the band. It all leads up to everything having a purpose for your life. And this is a kind of a cool concept too, and this stems back to the first chapter in Genesis, and being that before sin the world was perfect. Yeah, but like there was like other things too. Again, no, the world was perfect. And we'll talk about that in a sec, but like if the world was perfect, how is sin introduced? Because God allows us to have free will. And we'll talk about that in a second, but God created us to have a relationship with him. That's why we are drawn to things and have spiritual and religious ties to so many things, is because we are spiritual people. We are driven to have these relationships with our Father. God became human himself to bear the consequences of sin by suffering and dying on the cross for all mankind's sins. And that's the coming of Jesus and the first coming with everything, and how the core beliefs stem to that. And continue with that, humans have free will to make choices in their lives. Like I said before, I mean, if God has a plan for everything, then like, what's the purpose? And it's to fulfill his prophecies. And that to me is such a fascinating thing. And we talk about like God knows everything, so why what's the purpose, right? But we have free will, just like Eve had free will to pick the fruit of the forbidden tree. I mean, that's where we get at with these days. And the Bible is God's word, and going about that is such a unique concept. And here's some of the questions that are so elementary, but they're so deeply rooted in why Christianity exists and how we follow. And the first one being, obviously, how do we know God exists? I mean, it's faith, right? It's faith, and we were told he exists. But that's not all necessarily it. And how can we be sure Christianity is correct? And it's biblical. It's biblical. And again, it's not, Christianity is not one dimension. It's so much more faceted than that. You have like obviously Nazarene, because the school we go to. You have non-denominational Baptist, Lutheran, Catholicism. You have all these denominations of Christianity that fall into what is our purpose. And how can we be sure that the Bible is God's word? And that to me is something that's so historically profound. And when I was younger, we would get like our King James Bible, whatever you guys grew up with, and I found it so cool that the red text was what God said. Those were Jesus's words. And to me, that was so fascinating. Like, these are actually words that he said. Now, granted, they weren't in English, and they probably have been transcribed 1,000 times since then, but like the premise is still there, and that's how we know. Because he said these words. Jesus Christ, God said these words. Spiritual wellness continuing. The core dimensions of wellness, the core of all other wellness actions is spirituality. Everything, we'll talk about how everything that all 5 other dimensions are based around the principle of spirituality, and occupational, emotional, social, physical, all of it based around spirituality. It is the development of the inner self. Like, we choose to do things because of our, like, who we are as a person. And it determines attitudes, and attitudes guides our actions. Like, just inherently, I'm not an aggressive person. So when I play my sports or work out, like it's not something that I don't get angry to the point of physicality very often. And it's just part of me. That's who I am. We use all of these kinds, use all of these to make decisions in our other areas of life. So this is what we talked about: physical, social, emotional, intellectual, occupational. Everything stems from what our core beliefs are in our spirituality. And then Christians' attitudes are deeply rooted in the trust of God's word and examples of Jesus Christ set for us. So he had these plans, he had these actions for us, and he had this path for us. And again, everything has purpose. So we're not going to dive into all these questions that we have up here, but these are, if we were in class, we'd talk about each one and we'd have discussions, but I want you guys to kind of think about these a little bit, and like questions to think about. What are your spiritual beliefs. And just because you go to a Christian school does not mean that you are a Christian. And that's a topic that we can save for another day. But what is your belief in God? What is your belief in creation? I love talking about like creation and evolution. I love talking about that idea because it's such a weird kind of topic to bring up. God's love of man and how he affects us. What's your belief in Jesus Christ? Free will, the Bible, heaven, hell. Like all of these things are like, again, each one of those questions would be a whole lecture discussion on itself. So that's where we're at. And then, are these beliefs yours or were they given to you? And oftentimes we follow the path of what's told to us. Not always, but I went to a non-denominational church growing up, and I thought that's what I believed because that's what my parents did. I went to church that's what you did. And when I got to college, I was like, well, I want to try to see what's going on. I don't want to just follow just because I was told. So I went church hunting. Went to all sorts of different churches, and went to a Baptist church, a Nazarene church, a Lutheran church, just trying to find it. And I did the same thing when I moved here to Bourbonnais. I went church hunting. I wanted to find a church that fit me, because I didn't want my beliefs to be just because I was told. So that's kind of where we're at with that. And do you base them off of what's popular now? Or are they based off of what you? And the answer is probably a little of both. You have what your core beliefs are and what's popular for right now. I mean, you want to always have like that core value inside of you, like what you choose to do. But yeah, and then are they based off of principle or circumstance? And then again, why? We would talk about this in class, but it's hard to have topics where it's not just more about, I believe this because. It's so much more than that. It has so much more to do with circumstantial things and then the principles behind. So I think that they're based off both. That's just my personal opinion. Now we're going to dive into what we talked about at the beginning, is spirituality versus religion. And spirituality is relationship with the transcendent or a higher power. So it's not necessarily religion. Beliefs that every person has a soul and that a soul does not die when a person dies. So that's spirituality. Okay? And then religion is the vehicle for expressing one's spirituality. So, the doctrines and religious practices, examples, communion, prayer, baptism, stuff like that. The religion is the practice of your spirituality. And my spirituality, and I would assume a lot of our spiritualities, is Christianity. That's our spirituality. Doesn't necessarily mean that again, I'm trying to say that spirituality is not Christianity, it's not religion. Spirituality is the relationship with a higher power. And again, religion doesn't necessarily mean Christianity. People are religious about sports teams. People are religious about their jobs. So it has everything to do with the definition and the vehicle that you're presenting it in to be able to have that relationship. We tend to encase our spirituality within a distinctive framework which allows us to structure our faith. And so we have these like boxes, and like this is what you do when you're younger, this is what you do when you're in middle school, high school, college, newlyweds, or with children. Like we have these things that allow us to kind of segment how we practice our religion. And it's kind of cool. So you have like your women's youth groups and your men's youth groups, and you have all these things that fall in, and we're able to framework these things to be able to have like a true religious experience, be able to practice our spirituality. Meaning and the purpose of what we're doing. So meaning is how we view our place in life, and the purpose is the reason we exist. So the big question is, what is the purpose of life, and why did God put us here? When you figure that out, let me know. No, but the joking aside, I mean, the purpose of life isn't just to live and then we're done. I mean, the purpose of life is to live everything for Jesus Christ, and then at the end, we've lived everything for us. And then, so these are just worldly possessions. So our end goal isn't wealth, fame, and fortune here. It's an eternity with Jesus. And then why did God put us here? And that was to share his word and to be able to practice religion. Again, kind of calling back there. And then these questions are foundations to a person's existence. I mean, these are such loaded questions, and everyone has a profound, everyone has pondered these questions in their life, and everyone has their own answers, and even pastors have different answers. Pastors in the same church have different answers to these questions. What's the purpose of life, and why did God put us here? Every single person has a different perspective on it. Quick Easter egg, I told you guys I would do this. 2 free points. I want you to email me where you went to high school in the city, in the state. Easter egg. 2 free points. Purpose and value. Our spiritual purpose and our values are deeply, deeply connected. And what are Christian values? And again, this whole lecture is a loaded conversation. Our values are a natural extension of our spirituality, and will determine the decisions we make and actions that we take. It's not just, this is what we're going to do, this is what I'm told. It's all of these things have purpose, and our values kind of drive us to how we behave. Christians should give priority to God's values rather than the values of the world. And we should, and oftentimes we don't. And oftentimes we have our own agendas for a lot of things, and that doesn't make it right, but we do it. And the last one is Christianity. God's values are forgiveness, sacrifice, and love. And one that I will add in there is grace. I mean, grace is a huge thing that we expect, which is unfortunate, but we oftentimes don't give. But these are all foundations, and that's the things that we're going to talk about next class period. Told you. 16 minutes and 46 seconds. Told you I'd try to keep it under 20. Here we go with the final thoughts. We will continue with spiritual wellness next Tuesday in the Warman House, 8:30. Don't be late. Again, spiritual assessment due. I'll talk about it on Tuesday. On Canvas due at 10 p.m. You will need to use the pages 69 through 71 of your textbooks for this assessment. Complete the textbook pages before completing the assignment on campus. You'll need the textbook pages to do the assignment on campus. I don't have a book. Get it. Okay? Amazon, 2-day shipping. Last thing, first quiz will be on February 2nd at the beginning of class. Any questions, shoot me an email. If not, I'll see you guys on Tuesday. Have a good one.